Should we start? Okay. It's 11 o'clock. Yeah, you can start. You can. Hello, everybody, and welcome to session 13 on Controlled Vocabularies, the secret sauce that unlocks the power of data consistency and accessibility. I'm your moderator. I'm Cecilie Svenningsen. I'm from the GBIF Secretariat, and I'm joined here with my colleague Marie Rochon, who will be the online moderator of this session. Yeah. Do we have the title slide to play? Sorry. Title slide? Oh, no, title slide? Okay, never mind, it's fine. I just want to say thank you to our diamond sponsors for making this possible. And I also want to say thank you to the tech people here at Okinawa Congress Center. Thank you. Each talk will be 10 minutes, and then we have 3 minutes for presentations, 2 minutes to change, and this will be run strictly, so I'm sorry if I cut any of you off. If you're attending virtually, please ask the questions in the chat, and then Marie will make sure to go up to the microphone and ask them for you. If you want to continue the discussion online after this session, please use the chat function in Oxford Abstracts. There's a group chat that's created for this session. But let's get started, and we will start with our virtual presenters. So this will be Teresa talking about life stage.
The Arctos community has been slogging through a discussion about life stage since July of 2020. Examples of how the community wrestles with controlled vocabularies provide insight into the issues that arise when a diverse group of data providers and users attempt to build a controlled vocabulary that meets everyone's needs, ensures that data will be discoverable, and incorporates existing standards. There are also the difficulties of using an ontology and how time, money, people, and resources matter to this. The Arctos community agrees that controlled vocabularies are the secret sauce that unlock the power of data consistency and accessibility. This is evidenced by the over 100 controlled vocabularies they maintain, which can be viewed and used by anyone. One of these is age class, a controlled vocabulary meant to allow for consistent recording of values in the age class attribute. What exactly is this vocabulary meant to describe? As you can see, the Arctos community believes these terms are describing the age class, reproductive stage, life stage of the biological individual, juvenile, adult, eft, nymph, etc. Meanwhile, the Darwin Core equivalent, life stage, gives us the age class or life stage of the Darwin Core organism at the time the Darwin Core occurrence was recorded. Ugh. This makes me roll my eyes. Why do we insist on using the term in the definition? In both cases, it means that everyone assumes they know what an age class or life stage actually is, and people's varying definitions result in a confusion of vocabulary terms. This confusion led to a request for the Arctos community to look at the remaining terms in use in the age class attribute and perhaps clean them up a bit. Take a few seconds to digest the term cloud, and please do find your favorite term. I'm a personal fan of penultimate, but old adult holds a special place in my heart. The cleanup request also spawned the idea that perhaps we should be using the Darwin Core term life stage to increase compatibility with the broader community. There was general agreement, and so a new attribute was created. There is even a more refined definition that hopefully makes it easier for everyone to make decisions about what terms belong in the controlled vocabulary for life stage. With a new definition, the cleanup of age class began. Terms deemed to belong in life stage were moved to the new life stage attribute. This started with the GBIF life stage vocabulary, which seemed fairly easy for people to digest and agree with, at least for the terms listed here. Then the fun began. Is an embryo a life stage or a part? The Arctos community has not been able to decide, and so has both. As the part definition makes clear, it is preferable, in Arctos anyway, to record your embryos as whole organism parts with the life stage attribute value of embryo. But having these two essentially equivalent terms in different places leads to denormalized data. There is no one way in Arctos to find all of the embryos. As of August 14, 2024, a search across Arctos for part name of embryo brought up almost 10,000 records. Of those, only about 3,000 included the life stage attribute of embryo. But a search for records that included just the life stage value of embryo totaled almost 5,000 records. So, people who come searching for embryos in Arctos should beware. And let's just ignore the fact that there's also eggs. My point with that example is that controlled vocabularies are hard to create, and that they are never created in a vacuum. They exist alongside other controlled vocabularies, even within a single community. They are also almost never static. Either new terms are needed or definitions for existing terms need updating. I would assume that any TADWIG member knows this. Some people have created helpful methods for building controlled vocabularies, but I've never been able to get anyone to read them. The first question this method asks is, what do you want your controlled vocabulary to do? My personal experience is that biodiversity data providers just want to be able to properly spell terms or have students select them during data entry. But data users want to be able to rely on these terms to find what they are looking for. I also wonder if controlled vocabularies are really all they are cracked up to be. It may seem radical, but many of the points in the paper about not using them make a lot of sense. At the very least, any controlled vocabulary should probably include a list of associated or equivalent terms, because humans will use the term they are used to. Because of this and the fact that some terms are considered part of other terms, those managing controlled vocabularies are often directed to use ontologies. This has been repeated often in the Arctos community, but to date, nobody has really figured out how to do this. Which term in the ontology do you use when terms are equivalent, and how can a CMS make those equivalencies apparent? How much computing effort is involved in finding all of the equivalent terms or child terms when a parent is selected? Even if these issues are addressed, often no appropriate ontology can be found, especially when trying to create a vocabulary that crosses from art to zooplankton. Then there's the question I have about any external resource. Who is maintaining it, and will it be there in a usable form tomorrow? Is it even usable today? Still, I did find this, and it seems like it would be useful to everyone in the biological community. But it's not clear to me how this ontology is maintained or how I would treat repetitive terms like neonate stage. And let's face it, who among us has time for this? Here we have a TADWIG task group dedicated to the problem, but there are no listed members in the task group other than the convener, and there are 7 open issues in the GitHub repo with the TG4 tag, none of which appear to be active conversations. Why is this languishing? Is it because it's not needed? I don't think so. So what do we need? Consistent use of terms across many data sets means that it's easier to find what you want and even to record what you have. But decisions about which terms to use where can be quite difficult, especially when these decisions are being made by groups of volunteers collaborating globally. Monthly or even bi-weekly hourly meetings mean the process can take years, and in the meantime, it's possible that those not participating in the conversation are becoming enamored with terms the team hasn't even considered, or are developing a completely but parallel set of different terms. For me, controlled vocabularies have the same problem that plagues the digital extended specimen. A lack of agreement that this is a global need that we will all work toward together, and the application of resources to get it done. A central or distributed repository with paid people to maintain vocabularies, facilitate conversations, and offer expertise in vocabulary and community maintenance. But the hardest part, and the one I can never see a solution for, is that the process needs focused participation from the community. A community that, in my opinion, is already stretched far too thin and required to do far too much. What is needed are more people in more and different roles at the local level. I am grateful to the Arctos community for making attempts to use controlled vocabularies. Thank you for listening, and now let's discuss. As it is, I know there are resources in the world that others are using. What are they? I've mentioned some in this presentation. What other vocabularies are in use in our community? What do the users like and dislike about them? Please share your thoughts in this Google Doc. What resources do you wish were available? One of the first that came to my mind is a complete ontology of vertebrate bones, one that would provide the ability to let people searching for skulls also find them when they are part of the thing called skeleton. This Google Doc is open for people to review, and also all of the links that were included in this presentation are there. Thank you everyone for listening to my talk.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Unfortunately, there's no time for questions at this stage, but please direct any questions to Teresa in the chat. And I would like to call upon the next video. Yes. This is Jessica. Jessica is available for questions after we see her video, as well as Keeva, who is the next presentation after Jessica. Just a video for this person, right? Yes, please. Yes. Just video.
Hello.
Hello, Jessica.
Is there anything wrong with
Sorry,
it?
there's technical issues. That's why your video is not playing.
Oh, I can, if the connection is okay right now, I can also do the live presentation if that works better.
Is the video ready? Okay, one moment, Jessica. I think we will play the video just to be certain.
Sure.
The Arctos community has been slogging through a discussion about
Sorry, please excuse any technical
Hey
issues we might
everyone,
have.
welcome to my.
Yes.
When central New Jersey and multiple control vocabularies exist in biodiversity data. I'm Jessica Yuen Chen. I'm assistant professor at the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers University in New Jersey. So to get us start off with, where is New Jersey even? So for anyone who's not heard of the state, it is actually a state on the East Coast side of the United States, and it's often being called the Garden State for all the greenery scenes we have here. There's farms, there's gardens, a lot of things going on. And there are some famous people that you might heard of from New Jersey. There's the First Lady, Jill Biden. There's Meryl Streep. There's Whitney Houston. Some historical fact, Thomas Edison actually had his lab in New Jersey, and there's a town called Edison dedicated to him. If you have recently watched the movie Oppenheimer, there's one point when Einstein and Oppenheimer actually met, and they called home at one point. That's at Princeton University, also occurred in New Jersey. If you're like me, a Hamilton musical fan, Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr had their famous duel, which is very fatal as well, in Weehawken, New Jersey. And what is up with New Jersey? There's actually a debate over New Jersey's regions, where things are at, North or South New Jersey. Where is the line that draws the division of these regions? There are people saying that, okay, North and South are divided by if you are supporting New York's team or if you are supporting Philadelphia's team, because we are within proximity to both New York City and Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. Okay. But another type of divide, which is a little cuter, I would say, is how you call this particular type of ham. If you are a North New Jerseyan, you might more likely call it Taylor ham because of the name of the brand. But if you are in Southern New Jersey, you might call it pork roll because of the product name on this particular ham. So pork roll and Taylor ham, this is where it comes from. Another thing going on, a lot of region debates going on in New Jersey. There's an existential crisis in New Jersey, where if central New Jersey even exists. Central New Jersey, by the way, is where Rutgers University's main campus is located at. So there has been a lot of talks about there's actually central New Jersey and how do we divide Taylor ham and pork roll when there's this central region. And this is a map released by our Governor Murphy's office, where he actually drew out, central New Jersey, which counties are within these central regions, and where's the north and where's the south. But it's still pretty much debatable because we see all these different multiple maps, multiple renderings of New Jersey regions. There's north, central, south, and different people have different ways to divide the counties. There's North and South division, there's East and West in historical representations. There are actually even more granular ways to depict New Jersey's regions. Regions maps means that we have actually multiple control vocabularies. So vocabularies and geography is something that we really want to highlight in this talk, because your vocabulary, your control vocabularies can provide what people use in their drop-down menu list of the country. Their country list, their region list, and vocabularies can have potential biases that will seep into the way of your data set. So in library and information science, we have been studying a lot about how these biases were manifested in bibliographic classifications, such as the misrepresentation of subject, minorities, racial representations, indigenous people's knowledge, how they are manifested in our major classification like Dewey Decimal Systems. And there are also a lot of talks about how these social, cultural, political influence can also play a role in your classifications. So which geographic control vocabularies are actually using data set? A lot of the most common one is perhaps ISO standard, but ISO standard do have its position and its institution perspective. And there people may have been using the plan distribution from Tedway. And there's also people using their homegrown vocabularies, especially for regional kind of divisions. People can come up with their own vocabularies. And what do maps, geographic control vocabulary, really mean? They are not just a simple rendering of the world. They are not the gold standard because people can have their position and their influences on these vocabularies. So it can be used as a technology of power to assert some kind of discourse. It can also be leveraged to omit or silence minorities or amplify some elite groups. And what it means really in our biodiversity data is that if we have geographic, especially regional divisions, it is often used to represent species counts. You are aggregating species and talk about how much it is in a particular region. You are forming regions for collaborations for consortium, Mid-Atlantic, Herbarian, Southeast region network. There are species that have common names that attach region with it. And we have location data in our location metadata in our data, but then which ones are actually used among all of these great Darwin core elements are we actually being used? Other things, there are occurrences of the species. Again, how do we actually aggregate these species based on regions and their location? Is it reflecting the true counts? So here we provide just a toy example of the white-tailed deer that happens a lot in North America, specifically in New Jersey. We see this a lot. And their subspecies, their common names are indeed formed by regions. There's Northeast white-tailed deer, Midwest white-tailed deer, and so on. So in a state that are densely populated as New Jersey, there are talks about if we need to control species population, this particular deer, should we actually, hunt them or should we conserve them? Okay. So here we pull off data from GBIF, the observations of these type of white-tailed deer in New Jersey from last year to this year. And there's roughly around 1,000 occurrences. And this is what we wanted to highlight. If we are to divide not the true count, but aggregating the counts of these species based on their regions, this is a drastic difference that you can see based on the different control vocabularies you are using. If you are using the North and South division with Port Royal or Taylor ham, you see a very, very dense and dark colored population here in North New Jersey, meaning that maybe we need to do something to, maintain its population, we may hunt them. But here, if you are using another type of vocabularies that include Central New Jersey, the most densely populated of these deers happens in Central New Jersey. So perhaps we shouldn't do anything to it in North New Jersey. But if you see the two different maps, you can see this particular county, Ocean County, where it was really light in this particular one, but then very dark here. So what do we do in this particular region? And we use this more granular kind of division. What are we going to do with even this whole Central New Jersey region that is supposedly very densely populated with these deers, but in this particular map, they are very light. So are we conserving them or are we actually hunting them as a game species? Okay. So this brings us to our concluding slide about the discussion we wanted to bring out to people, wanted to discuss in this session. Of course, conservation or wildlife management really still depends on the regulation or workflow of a particular state or particular area. But we wanted to bring from this talk that everybody should be mindful when they are aggregating things in their data sets, especially with species counts. What are you actually aggregating? What are we aggregating? Which region vocabularies are you actually choosing? So this actually is the power of control vocabulary. It can pose biases or it can actually lead to different types of success. I'd like to acknowledge my team members and as well as the generous funding provided by School of Communication, Information and Rutgers for this particular research. And thank you, everybody. I hope I can talk more with you in this session. Or if you have any questions, feel free to email me at yunchen@rutgers.edu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. And we have time for a question or two if anybody has some. Is there anyone online? No. Oh, Jessica has a comment. Can you go to the microphone, please? Oh, Jessica, can you come with your comment? Sorry, online. Would that be okay?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that the maps on the toy example that we were using were not normalized. So it's just to showcase, to demonstrate an example of how vocabularies can matter. But I also want to use this opportunity to invite anyone who has other toy examples on other species. And if you wanted to play with regions, geographic vocabularies, please, email me and we can have further conversations or future collaborations as well.
Thank you. Jutta, did you have a question?
I have a comment maybe. Thank you very much for your talk. Exciting to see like that scope and scale matter. And it really is, for me, it is about what questions do you ask at what scale. So if you're thinking about conservation at a global scale, so like for the global monitoring of wild-tailed deer to evaluate its status in a red list, for example, you might use a different map that is globally accepted to answer this question, but it might not tell you a lot about your in-state situation, about what's going on with the deer at home. So at that scale, it's very reasonable to use a very different map. And even these maps might depend on what kind of questions you ask. So I think we need both. We need to have a global standard, and we need to have then these local maps or local contexts that allow us to answer more specific questions. And I was wondering if this is something that you have been thinking about or you could agree to, or if you have a different solution.
Yeah, great observations, and absolutely, I totally agree with you. Depending on different scale, global, federal, state, local, county level, we can always use different maps, and depending on who you are, which agency, there's a different perspective and possibly different agenda to push. So people might be using different maps. In terms of solution, actually, this is stemming from my prior line of work on taxonomy alignment, which we try to align different taxonomies, different vocabularies, and then see where, if the global level, we use this map, we have this controlled vocabulary. At local level, we use another one. How do we make them more interoperable with each other? So there's a way where we can possibly find a common ground where everybody can work with. So that's another study that I have on taxonomy alignment. Yeah, so that is how we can maybe mitigate a little bit of this. But to be honest, it's a very hard problem, and we're still navigating the waters here as well.
Thank you very much, Jessica.
Thank you.
We are moving on to the next speaker. This is Keeva, also a video, and then we go on to online presentations after this. But Keeva is available for questions. Sorry? Oh, you know what I mean.
Hi, I'm Keeva. I'm here to talk about harnessing and harmonizing controlled vocabularies to drive data discoverability in the Australian Reference Genome Atlas, or ARGA. So ARGA is a joint initiative between a few organisations here in Australia, so that includes the Atlas of Living Australia, the Australian Biocommons and Bioplatforms Australia. We're enabled through NCRIS, which is the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy, and we also have some additional support from ARDC, that's the Australian Research Data Commons. So ARGA is an indexing platform for genomic data for eukaryotic species in Australia and which are otherwise relevant to Australia. And essentially what it does is it indexes multiple online genomic data repositories. It aggregates their metadata so that a user can then access ARGA to search for the available genomic data from the one place. And we also supplement the genomic data that we're indexing with other relevant information, so things like taxonomy data, occurrence data, ecology data. And we do that for a few reasons. It can help users to kind of recontextualize the genomic data that they're accessing to better understand things about data provenance and where data came from, and then that in turn can help with the process of data assessment. So one of the primary tasks for ARGA is to integrate different data types from different sources which are developed for research domains, but then those data and the metadata are described according to different standards and using different controlled and very often uncontrolled vocabularies. And then so essentially what we're trying to do is to harmonize those different terms and vocabularies that we're accessing from different places. And the reason we kind of need this vocabulary harmonization is so that we can recognize and reconcile kind of synonymous and related terms. And that kind of underlies a few things in ARGA. So consistent data interpretation for the user, comprehensive searching and effective filtering, and robust summary statistics as well. And those kind of three things in particular kind of hinge on the ability to recognize synonymous terms and also aggregate information under kind of common higher attributes. And then this is just a bit of an overview into, I guess, our process for data harmonization. So firstly, identifying fields in our own kind of data schema which require or could benefit from having controlled vocabularies. Secondly, identifying any kind of existing vocabularies, ontologies, and frequently used uncontrolled terms. Thirdly, reconciling those terms and identifying synonyms and kind of other similar and related terms. We're then retrieving areas for those reconciled terms as well, and using SCOS properties to then describe the terms, as well as any kind of semantic mapping and hierarchical structuring. And then the final step there is to publish and maintain those controlled vocabularies. So in terms of identifying fields which could benefit from controlled vocabularies, we kind of have this data model here, which kind of hinges around this 10-part event chain, which models kind of the process of a genomic datum from the specimen collection through to DNA sequencing, genome assembly, through to data deposition and reuse. And so each of those events kind of has an assortment of different metadata fields that describe what happens to the specimen or the sequence during that event. And then around the slides here, I've just put a few examples of fields which we've identified as being candidates for having kind of controlled vocabularies in ARGA. So then the next step is to identify kind of existing resources. So controlled vocabularies that are being used by the data sources that we're indexing. There's a few examples there from BOLD, which is the Barcode of Life Data Systems, and the INSDC, that's the International Nucleotide Sequence Database collaboration, and that kind of includes a few different repositories, including like NCBI GenBank, some of the really big DNA repositories globally. We're also looking at ontology terms, particularly the ontologies that are being recommended by data sources or data standards. So for example, the MIXIS standards, which are used by INSDC, that's the minimum information about any sequence that recommends a few different ontologies for a few different fields in that standard. And then we're also looking at frequently used terms. And this one's particularly important to us because so much of the data that we're accessing and indexing doesn't really use any controlled vocabularies at all. So it's a lot of uncontrolled terms. So after collating those terms, we then kind of need to identify any synonyms or semantic similarities and equivalences. And for our larger vocabularies, we're using OpenRefine, which is an online tool, which essentially allows you to map two term lists against each other, identify any kind of identical entries, and suggest matches for other terms based on the similarity between them. And it makes use of these kind of reconciliation APIs, which are available for a few kind of online sources, so things like Wikidata. And that allows you to not only like match against terms, but also retrieve other information like eries, term definitions, term relationships. And we're also using CSV Reconcile, which is an open source software, which essentially allows you to reconcile to a local data set saved to a CSV. So for example, we're using this for the terms that we're indexing ourselves, so the frequently used terms. And then this is just a bit of a screenshot, I guess, of what it kind of looks like. So this is an example for country. And then these are term names here that we've taken from the Getty Thesaurus of Geographic Names. And then we've also accessed their eries and kind of preferred terms from their reconciliation API. And then we've used CSV Reconcile for the INSDC's controlled vocabulary for countries. And then our index terms are here as well. And we've just got kind of internal IDs that we're using to better track where those terms are coming from and mapping where they're from. And then after term reconciliation, we look at kind of vocabulary structuring. And depending on the vocabulary, defining hierarchical structuring can be really useful for implementing higher level searching and filtering, and for aggregating mismatched terms under kind of higher common attributes. So we kind of pull the different terms from these different kind of sources, and then we determine relationships between them and arrange them into an hierarchical structure. And just to walk you through, I guess, a bit of an example, so for sequencing platform, the Mixer standard recommends terms from this ontology for biomedical investigations term, DNA sequencer, so there's a few examples there. And then I've also just taken a random assortment from 3 different genomic data sources here. And you can see there's a bit of a difference in, I guess, the level of detail that those terms are being described to. So then we want to identify synonyms by reconciling terms either with OpenRefine or manually, as well as looking at parent-child relationships. So I've got some examples there for Illumina, which is kind of the company which produces sequencing technologies, and then say HiSeq and NovaSeq, which are the actual platforms that are being produced. So then we kind of build our hierarchy and we put in any intermediate terms. So here they're outlined in blue, which can assist with kind of that hierarchical structuring, even if we haven't kind of come across them in any of the term lists that we're using. And then essentially what this enables us to do is allow a user to search for something, say using like the term Illumina, and then it will pull up records which have any of these kind of platforms in their metadata. And then just a bit about how we're marking up those vocabularies. So we're assigning each term an AGA vocab ID, so something that looks a bit like that at the moment. We're also assigning basic properties like pref label definition using kind of SCOS properties. Reconciled terms we're describing with SCOS mappings, so mostly exact match because I guess that's kind of what we're focusing on, and it's a lot easier to get out of OpenRefine. These kind of narrow match, broad match, and close match, they kind of take a bit more manual curation. And then describing hierarchical structuring, we're also doing with SCOS properties, so SCOS broader and SCOS narrower to really build in those kind of parent-child relationships. And we do that all in a spreadsheet, which we then feed into SCOS Play, which is another online tool which enables us to essentially convert it into a turtle file. And then our final kind of step is publishing those vocabularies. And our intention is to kind of make them publicly available on AGA's kind of resources domain, which we haven't built yet, but will probably exist at that URL there, and also through ARDC's Research Vocabularies Australia RVA platform. And finally, just to close, I'd like to acknowledge the AGA development team who have worked really hard on this platform. Thanks.
Thank you, Keeva. I think we have time for one question if anybody has any questions for this. There's nobody online, right? Or no? Okay. Okay. I had a question, but I didn't write it down. Yes, I think I just have one comment. Sorry, Jutta? Okay. Keeva, I'm working for GBIF, and we're doing something very similar, which you will see in a presentation a bit later. I would really like to talk to you because I think we are basically doing the same thing twice. So I will chat with you more later, but I don't have a direct question. So I think if it's okay, we will just go on to the next presenter, which is Erika Krimmel. But thank you very much, Keeva, for being present online.
Thank you. And yeah, feel free to reach out. It'll be great to talk. Cheers.
Hello, fellow controlled vocabulary fans. Woo! As a person with library training, I love a good list. I'm excited about this session. Thank you so much for organizing, Cecilia. I am going to be talking about a time for chronostratigraphic vocabulary. It's now, but how? Two of my co-authors, Talia and Holly, are in the room as well. And unlike me, Talia actually has a background in geology, so she can answer technical questions related to that part of this talk. So I want to start off with the elephant in the room. What are we even talking about? We had a lot of talks with Cecilia about what chronostratigraphy is. You can just call it like geotime. It's rock time. It's the age of a rock, and it's important because in the geo and paleo sciences, we use it to judge the age of a fossil. It's also important in other contexts, but that's the area that we're talking about now. So in Darwin Core, we have a class of terms called geological context. About 50% of them relate to chronostratigraphy. And those are the terms that our work with this controlled vocabulary is focused on. So why make a controlled vocabulary for chronostratigraphy? You can think of chronostratigraphy as being the paleo or fossil equivalent to collecting date. So if you were studying a modern species and you didn't know when a specimen was collected, that would be a problem for most people. And similarly for geo and paleo scientists, not knowing the chronostratigraphy is also a problem. So the figure on the slide that's annotated is from Mason Heberling's work a few years ago to kind of classify the disciplines that were using GBIF-mediated data. And you can see there's a wide variety. Only 5% of the studies in Mason's work were related to an earth science discipline. But on this slide, all of the purple stars are disciplines that have an earth science equivalent. So basically, if the data were available, geopaleo scientists would want to do similar work with the same kinds of data that are available on GBIF, but we can't find them right now. So the problem was that we have digitized a lot of specimens, nearly 10 million fossil specimens are in GBIF, but without a controlled vocabulary for chronostratigraphy, they were really hard to find. Because again, that chronostratigraphic information element is such a crucial discovery point for these types of data users. So our ingredient list for the secret sauce of controlled vocabulary, in this case was specifically from Cecilia, 22.7 million data points. So those are values in any of the 10 Darwin core fields related to chronostratigraphic information that she distilled down into 6,750 distinct values. And then ideally, each one of those 6,750 distinct values maps to one of 176 controlled vocabulary concepts from the International Commission on Stratigraphy's geochronostratigraphic chart. We want to add the people element in as well, because that's my theme for Spinach Tadwig this year, is that people are important. So also ingredients in the secret sauce. We're collaborating across disciplines here. So the GBIF team was working with members of the Paleo Data Working Group to work on this controlled vocabulary. And both the GBIF and the Paleo Data side were mediating this expert content knowledge contribution. So experts from both the development side on the GBIF folks end and the research and geo and paleo side and collection side from the Paleo Data side. And then finally, we also needed capacity to do the legwork of actually mapping raw values from data providers to the vocabulary concepts. Our process for putting all these ingredients together into a controlled vocabulary is roughly outlined here. The long story short is that this took a lot of time, you know. A lot of that time was kind of waiting around, which is okay. Initially, the Paleo Data Working Group had reached out to GBIF 4 years ago to ask if the geological context terms could be indexed, because we thought no one's finding our specimens. And GBIF, it turns out, has a lot of priorities, and they can't just reply to every single person who asked for something. But when an opportunity came up for them to integrate our needs into their existing strategic pipeline and their development plans, they reached out to us, and we started working with GBIF, the purple section, on this controlled vocabulary. And then we really hit a accelerator when we were in person in Copenhagen, and we could kind of hash out some of the details in person. So the point we're at now is that there is a rough implementation of this vocabulary, which is really cool. In case you're wondering, like, what are we actually trying to do here? It's pretty simple. You can see in the example, like if we have a data provider who says E period Carboniferous in the Darwin core field latest period or highest system, all we want to do is have a user find that record when they search for Carboniferous. In this case, there is no such thing as early Carboniferous. The data provider probably means that, like, it was the beginning of the Carboniferous, sure. But we want the user to be able to find it based on Carboniferous. So what we were doing is mapping the 6,750 raw values to vocabulary concepts. That was a lot harder to get from that general, it's pretty simple idea to the reality of, like, having that data mapped. Some of the questions that came up that kind of caused us to pause and think or totally redo all the work that we did are things like, how should we interpret uncertainty in the verbatim values? You know, there's a question mark in what the data provider gave us. What do we do with that? You might think that's a pretty easy answer, but in certain fields like geology, a question mark in stratigraphic information has a certain level of formality, kind of like a qualifier might for a taxonomic identification. So not all data providers are doing that in their data, but some are. So we had to balance considerations like that. And we really strove to find this balance where we were making interpretations that were as solid as possible. So when in doubt, we didn't interpret data. The flip side of that is that then things might be less discoverable. Another thing I want to highlight here is that this idea of how can we consider accessibility for a global audience of regional users, that came up a lot for us in this process, because actually Jutta and Jessica pointed this out in their talk and comment. We have these global data standards like this international chronostratigraphic chart for chronostratigraphy, but it turns out a lot of people using chronostratigraphic data care about their regional terms, which are also relatively formalized, and we don't have the capacity to integrate that in our controlled vocabulary with GBIF at this point, so it's kind of a major standing point. Okay, here's some of what we did. So in the green and blue, those are all instances of we took a data point and we successfully mapped it to a controlled vocabulary concept. That's great. And that covered like almost 90% of data points. So this really underscores the value of just having a controlled vocabulary to begin with, because remember, 0% of this data was discoverable before there was a controlled vocabulary. Immediately, almost 90% is now discoverable. Cool, cool, cool. The flip side of that is that now we're looking at, instead of the 22.7 million data points, these are the 6,750 distinct values, and nearly half of them in the grayscale are really like uninterpretable, or we couldn't map them to a vocabulary concept. So this is a pattern that we see all over, we're all familiar with. There's like a long tail where you end up spending most of your time. Okay. I want to close with just some ideas on what's next for us in the future. So near term, there's some work that the Paleo Data Working Group can do to reach out to data providers so that, you know, GBIF is getting cleaner, more interpretable data to begin with. There's also some work we could do with Darwin Core to help kind of streamline and make that better. And then we'd like to, get feedback on the work we've done. It's all very new. It hasn't really gone through like testing yet. Bigger picture, our takeaway from doing this work is that we kind of need a richer information storage and retrieval system from chronostratigraphy. It's basically like at the level of complexity as taxonomy. And we need to be able to reflect things like hierarchical relationships and regional terms that have synonyms that are at a global level. So that is way beyond the scope of any work that GBIF or the Paleo Data Working Group is thinking of right now, but something we recognize. And with that, I think I maybe have 1 minute for questions.
Yes, we have 1 minute. So if anybody has a question for Erica, please stand up. Otherwise, let me know if there's something online, Marie. No online questions. Yes, sorry. Yes, Deb, you can go ahead.
So Erica, you started with a group like the Paleo Data Working Group had this vision, but your knowledge of what's inside the different collection management software. So we've been asked questions, various members of the community, people will say, like from the botany community, well, what do other botanists put in this field? What do other geologists put in this field? What do other, pick your favorite discipline, put in this field? And someone once told me, go to GBIF and download the whole thing and do SQL database, which I can do, and then do select distinct count star to figure out what those fields are and try to start working at what could we do. And I was like, wait a minute, how do we help the community see that? So that the botany meeting, the botanists have a meeting about this so that they're part of this conversation. How can you envision we can involve more people across different disciplines to do this?
We have more money to pay people to spend time on it.
Yeah,
I mean, really, like this happened because we have a grant that funded me to put actual time into this. This is ridiculous for us to be expecting like the community to dedicate individuals' free time to something that's so valuable. And like we all have the best of intentions. We'd all love to be able to spend time, but we all have so many responsibilities, and it's for things that are truly like a community benefit, such as developing a controlled vocabulary. We need to fund it from the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we will move on to Jutta.
Okay, welcome. In this talk, I will share some of our experiences gained during developing the data model for RECODE, the new collection management system for the Natural History Museum in London.
Sorry, can I just stop you? We need a new slideshow. Jutta?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Sorry, Jutta. Yes, thank you.
That is much better, I know that. Okay, so I'm reporting from RECODE, the new collection management system that we are developing for the NHM in London. CMSs are situated at the intersection of distinct stakeholder communities and their objectives. We need to integrate and mediate a wide range of demands to provide functionality, user experience, and data fit for purpose. In the RECODE team, diverse work streams complement each other and contribute to the development and implementation of the CMS. My fellow team colleagues will have different perspectives on what lies at the core of our work. Here I will point out that data and knowledge certainly are part of the beating heart of a CMS. And I will postulate that thus controlled vocabularies are of key importance. While metadata standards and ontologies provide guidance for structuring data resources and workflows, controlled vocabularies standardize and harmonize the data content in those structures. Their development is informed by data profiling, implementation, theory, and experience. All in all, controlled vocabularies are a means of quality assurance and applicability. Controlled vocabularies contribute to becoming aware of and differentiating dimensions of information present in metadata concepts. They thereby are enabling comprehensive, information-rich descriptions of reality. So required are comprehensive and well-understood sets of definitions for atomized concepts. The primary aim is to provide well-defined terms and term sets that can be clearly understood. Within the overall data infrastructure environment, controlled vocabularies are key contributions to achieving data interoperability, findability, and reusability. They can be harmonized across different scientific and applied disciplines, as well as distributed data infrastructures. They thus are indispensable for data sharing and the automation of work processes. Shared open fair data and machine actionability are needed for implementing, for example, a global biodiversity observation system in support of global biodiversity monitoring and conservation. However, controlled vocabularies can become complex and extensive. Instead of introducing challenges for users, they should improve user experiences through context-specific subsets of terms for manual selections, and as well automated, for example, default entries. This shifts infrastructure development to an additional layer of rules and constraints that determine interface dynamics and data validation. So, on the right, you see a diagram centered on the beige class that is capturing data on taxonames for meteorites. One main point of the graphic is to show that this one central class is surrounded by an extensive cloud of green controlled vocabulary classes. Remember, my talk is about complex vocabularies, so you're not expected to really read anything on these diagrams. Just take in the overall gestalt of things. So as users, you might not want to see the long-term list. So if you focus on this long line of terms on the right border, so as a user, you don't want to see a very long-term list. You want to be guided step by step along the blue pathway, along always encountering a small set of suitable terms. Alternatively, the system might give users who know what they are looking for a way to quickly filter a long list of meteorite types down to the one term that they want. In that case, the rest of the terms higher up in the hierarchy can be entered automatically. And you could see the second pathway with if you see the yellow line connecting down to the long terms list. So during the implementation stage, context-specific controlled vocabularies raise challenges. Should they be implemented as part of the data model layer in the form of class subtypes? Or should they be implemented through scripting as part of a policy and validation layer? So what you see here is a visualization, kind of like adding it to the data model layer, which is clarifying how a reference can be linked to entries of any of the other entities in the CMS data model. So bibliographic record links via a yellow linking class called bibliographic citation to, for example, the taxon name class, or a class for collection objects, data on determination, or data on stratigraphic interpretations. As usage term, so then we have a property, a usage term stating that a reference is the original publication of a taxonomic name. However, this usage term original publication doesn't make sense in the context of a collection object or stratigraphic interpretations. Thus, each of the links connecting the different endpoints needs to be associated with a different set of control terms describing how a reference is used in this context. So, since contexts have multidimensional structures, horizontal subtyping might be complemented by vertical, that is hierarchical or networked parent-child relationships among different but related and dependent controlled vocabularies. So the diagram you're going to see on the right is focusing on descriptors of collection objects. And so we are starting the diagram by, it's one line of doubling core, discus, OpenDS in blue, and Latimer core properties, which provide a hierarchical backbone for structuring subtype classes of controlled vocabularies. The terms of the vocabularies or the vocabulary classes in the backbone become themselves then split out as subtypes of the class, which results in, so to say, a hierarchical, horizontal dimension and tree structure. These horizontal subtypes are then connected in a hierarchical tree, or more often a network, to define and show which terms are meaningful and thus can be used in which context across the different layers and in the different parts of the structure. And finally, the different horizontal and vertical dimensions are combined, and voila, you have complexity. Many subclasses within the network have specific sets of what you might call leaf terms. See again the green classes. In some, the resulting term sets are specifically applicable to collection objects categorized at different levels and in different parts of the classification. Finally, to handle all that complexity and the sheer amount of terms and relationships, daily work with controlled vocabularies requires extensive documentation. So we need, as a community, and I see this as a community process, we need functionality for creating comprehensive specifications, including relationships, tracking, provenance and versioning, recording rules, constraints and validations, and defining mappings. So there is a need for an open shared repositories and work environments that foster the versatile user-driven development of terminologies, ontologies, mappings, and term policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jutta. Unfortunately, there's not time for questions, but yeah, we will follow up. The next speaker is Sophie.
Hi everyone, I'm Sophie Pamerlon from JB France, and today I will be presenting the work of my colleagues at the Patronat department in France. Patronat is an expertise and data center for natural heritage, and it's hosted at the National Museum of Natural History in Paris. I just want to say quickly first that I'm not a habitat person. So if you have specific questions on the reference list or habitats in France, you might ask them to me and I transfer them to my colleagues. But I'm a standard person, so I'm here to make the link between the work of my colleagues that are listed at the bottom of this slide and the international community of standards like TADWIC. So the first question we might ask ourselves is, what are typologies for? I realize it might not be the most adequate question to ask a room full of people that work with controlled vocabularies, but as you know, when you take pictures of a specific biodiversity or environmental concept, and you ask people to describe it, you might get as many answers as people you've asked. So in the case of habitats, if you show people this picture, you will have answers, really basic answers, such as it's a beach with big rocks covered by slippery seaweeds. Or you might get more specific answers from specialists. But in this case, nobody speaks the same language. So really, typologies are for simplifying a complex reality, defining and naming types, in this case, habitat types, in order to order and classify them. And it serves as a reference to establish a common language in order to build bridges between stakeholders from science to management, define common working units, mutualize needs and knowledge, and of course, exchange data. In the case of national habitat typologies, the work of my colleagues for a few years now has been to build an up-to-date list of all habitats present in France. And one important key point is that they wanted to be in control of its management and updates. National habitat typologies serve to define a common language at the national, regional, and local levels. In this case, regional is infra-national level because we have administrative entities in French that are called regions. It's not a bigger region like we might say at the international level. And lastly, they wanted to formalize a French point of view to share at the European and international level. So the typologies go both ways. It's first to structure a common language at the national level, but also use it to speak with other countries at the global level. So I zoom in on a specific typology that is called NatHab. It's currently at its third version, I think. The last one dating back to 2019. And it's a hierarchical list of habitats present in French waters. So both freshwater and marine waters. It comprises 5 levels of description details with more than 660 units. And it's, of course, mapped to other typologies or reference lists, such as the Barcelona Convention list, UNIS, and the EU list of habitats of interest. And if you screenshot the QR code here, you can access this specific typology. So when we zoom in on a specific habitat page on this typology, we find its the habitat code and name, a link to its webpage, its hierarchical classification, a description, of course, with abiotic factors, distinctive features, variability, characteristic species, associated species, risk of confusion, natural dynamics, and geographical distribution. And then on the other page, you can find its conservation interest, eventual threats, trends, references, and of course, the authors and date of description. So now I'll be zooming out to talk about HABREF, which is a reference list for habitat typologies. So I was first speaking about typologies, and now I'm speaking about a larger list of habitat typologies. So as I was saying, before HABREF was implemented in France, there were many habitat lists and classification systems, but no comprehensiveness of national diversity of habitats. So we had, as I was saying, the Barcelona Convention list, the Red List, OSPRA, Habitat Directive, UNIS, Natura 2000, and SNIEF at the national level for managing habitats, but it was all a bit mixed and without a real reference list. So that's why a common language was needed for data optimization, and we also needed a comprehensive national habitats inventory. So that's why HABREF was created in 2015. So HABREF is a database. It's not a typology itself, it's a typologies reference list. Its scope or perimeter is metropolitan and overseas France on all kinds of environments, both terrestrial and marine, and also freshwater environments. It comprises habitats and vegetation terms, so phytosociology. And it also integrates and aggregates international and national typologies. So during the databasing, during the development of this national habitat list, there was some metadata that were added to each typology in order to better reference them. And one really important work that was done was also to assign unique typologies IDs that are called CD Hub for habitat code, allowing for the interoperability of programs that use this habitat list. And it is shared on the INPN website. So INPN is the National Inventory for Natural Heritage, and it's available as a database or as Excel or web page formats on the INPN website. So you can find the URL at the bottom of the slide or a QR code. So the current version of HABREF is the 7th one. It's it's from last year, and it contains 37 reference typologies with more than 35,000 valid units and 45,000 correspondences with other typologies. Almost 100,000 habitat taxon relationships, and it's mapped to UNIS 2022 and the Habitat Directive. So there's correspondence between the habitat codes within the national typology reference list and international reference lists. And it also includes the NatHab Atlantic description, which is the national typology for benthic habitats of the Atlantic Ocean, Channel, and Northern Sea. So the goals of this newer version of the reference list is to develop the status database that are linked to other national programs, such as TaxRef for taxons or the traits database, and to share distribution data about all habitats. So to summarize, we've got the typologies that can be both French or international typologies that are aggregated within the database. So once again, HABREF isn't a typology, but a database of typologies. And you can visualize and download habitat information from HABREF on the INPN website. So this is the user interface of the HABREF database. So what's next? So first of all, we really wanted to share our experience with typologies and aggregating typologies at the French level. So there will be continuing updates to the national reference list of habitats and typologies, of course, at the national level. We will continue to work and to link, to make links with the other or new international typologies. in the next versions of the reference list. And what we were wondering if there was an interest for a third week interest or working group about habitats and habitat typologies. To aim towards a global list of habitat typologies, maybe a Darwin core extension for habitats or habitat typologies. What I just presented might be a use case, but it's not mandatory. And lastly, I just wanted to ask who would be interested and who would want to contribute, or what existing group we could join in order to talk about habitats. So thank you for your attention, and yeah.
Thank you very much, Sophie. We need to go to the next speaker, unfortunately, but let's continue discussion on the chat. Adeline, are you ready? Yes.
Hello, everyone. I'm not sure. Yeah. Today, we will do exactly the opposite. We have the controlled vocabulary and structured data, and we will explore how to generate text from that. In the room, I suppose, if I say controlled vocabulary and need structured data, you will think automatically to computerize papers, guides, scientific things, to have information system. We've got a lot of information system now, a lot of data, a huge amount of data. You have some in Catalog of Life, Expert, Fish Bars, Flow, World Flora Online. You've got a lot of things like that. But what about exactly the opposite? Now we have this huge amount of data, they are structured, but if you want to publish, you need to rewrite them yourself because you want nice sentences, readable sentences. And in this case, it's not automatic. And of course, if you have something you can do automatically, you can improve the text and pages, so it could be great. So the idea is how? How from this kind of structured data with vocabulary, we can have nice description. And to do that, we will focus today on only one thing. How can we use a single line from a taxon by character matrix to reconstruct the description? And to do that, a first solution, DexXP, yeah. Unpronounceable. It's difficult to say this name, but it's okay. It's a tool developed with the first version of Expert, so it's quite old. And the idea is it necessary to rebuild the code of this, or maybe find another solution? So the idea is you create an outline, and it will find into Expert the information to reconstruct sentences. In blue, you've got the thing extract from an Expert database and input and change in the text. And in green, it's the little word to have nice sentences. So it's powerful, but it needs a lot of human parts. So what if IA will be better? We try with a common taxa. It's Pinus. I'm sorry about that, but the generated text is in French, so you have to believe in myself. The results are good. It's okay, Pinus, I think everyone knows what it is. So Google and internet know well this too. So yeah, the ChatGPT has been trained with a lot of information. So yeah, we've got very good results, but if we have a look with more obscure taxa, the results are quite different. So this is an archaeocyax, very old sponges. And in this case, it's a mess. And I will describe it for you. A very nice archaeocyax. And each part of the archaeocyax are in a different color. So you will follow me very easily, I think. And the specialists are very nice because the specialists structure their description, use controlled vocabulary, so it should be very easy to have something with ChatGPT, and not at all. So most of the time, we begin with the purple part, name the outer wall, then the inner wall in green, then some partition in blue, and if it concerns, you have some gray part and called links, and in pink, you have tabulae. So you should have exactly this succession in the description. And this is two solutions proposed by ChatGPT. You can see the color don't really follow what I just said. But the most important thing, if you have a look at the first one, the green appears too. And this is very a mess because it takes some characters from part of the inner wall and use them to describe something else. It's exactly as if in the database I say I've got pink circular glasses, and ChatGPT say my shoes are pink and circular. It doesn't make sense at all. The second part is a little better, but some information appears twice, and most of the description is made with absence. Absence of tabulae, absence of this. It's not exactly what we do when we describe taxon, so it doesn't work very well. And if we try DeskXP for the archaeocyax, the results are amazing. But the problem is on the left, it's only a small part of the outline you need to explain to obtain the very good results, so it's very time consuming. Well, you do it only once, so after when you have to update things, it will be very fast. But the first time, it's, too much time. So we've got two possibilities, something with very nice result, but time consuming and a little difficult to begin with, and something easy to use and quick, but with results not very good at all. So probably we need to mix something and try to do something using both. But before doing that, I think we need to explore other things. We need to have a look with the comparison between taxa, because it's important to say, hey, this species is the only one with these specific characters, so we need to find a solution to have this in a text description, automatically generated. And another thing that can be very interesting is to try and synthesize several lines of the initial matrix. If you have a description of all the species inside the genus, it will be good to have automatically a good description of the genus. So this is the other thing we need to explore before finish this automatically generated text. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any question, maybe we've got some time.
Yeah, we have time for questions if anybody has some. Is there anybody online? There was a question for Sophie online, but... Oh, okay, maybe we should wait with that. Yes. Could you go to the microphone, please?
Thank you for your presentation. I was wondering if you foresee any applications in terms of making those descriptions available in other languages. Is this one of the considerations?
We try to do something else for different language. We have a prototype. We can just have a translation tab and use this translation type to have everything and switch the language. So it's on the road, and yeah, but not with this.
So does it mean that you're maintaining a multilingual vocabulary?
Why not?
I just want to know.
Why not? Well, I'm a paleontologist, and archaeocet, it's my fossil. There's a lot in Russian, and we work with the Russian for a Russian version, so why not Montenegro or Chinese, or I don't know. Yeah, if I've got someone who speaks this language.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adeline. I think we will switch to the last presentation, which is me. So hi, everyone. Thank you for sticking out. Oh, this is really lower. Can you hear me all right? Yes, okay, good. Oh, it's the angle. Okay, my name is Cecilie Svenningsen. I'm a data administrator at the GBIF Secretariat. I'm a biologist by training. I'm not a technician, no, sorry, I'm not a developer or anything, but I'm here to present GBIF's vocabulary server, which is a tool we started implementing this year, really, but it's been ongoing for some years now. Oh, how can we do this? Okay, so just to introduce anyone who doesn't know GBIF, you've probably heard it name dropped so many times by now, but I just want to put in context why we have this vocabulary server. So we are a global biodiversity data portal with around 3 billion occurrence records across 107,000 datasets. These are published by our global data publishing community, and they provide more than 85 searchable terms in these datasets that are based on biodiversity data standards such as Starving Core and others. So more than 2,000 data publishers are sharing verbatim values with GBIF across these 85 searchable terms. So what we want to do is to use controlled vocabularies to interpret these verbatim values, which will in turn provide our user base increased standardization so they can actually access more information than what the data publisher maybe necessarily shared in the beginning. So it's also really a tool to improve GBIF services. That's the main point of this tool. So controlled vocabulary, Erica showed a nice example as well. Just with this example, we have kingdom. We have the hidden values. You can see they're quite varied, but we then go through the exercise, or we have people going through that exercise of actually mapping those to controlled values. And the tool is available in the GBIF registry. It's also available through our vocabulary API. It's free and open, so you can use it if you need to. And we also have all the construction and maintenance handled in a GitHub repository. This is also where we work with our community. So we have full open visibility of what we're doing. And I just want to show you, it's very simple, but this is the UI for our portal. And we have a vocabulary server. We have these vocabularies that are currently in there. We have different terms we currently made so far. For sex vocabulary I'm going to show, we have 5 concepts. And when we go into these concepts, we can see how we really work with this. As you will see, there's 443 hidden labels. So that's what the publishers provided with us. So we basically gone through the whole exercise of taking all these different verbatim values and made sure that we map them to male. So now they're actually searchable in the GBIF portal. And what it really does is that it really improves the searchability. So for example, type status and sex, when it's in production, it's not in production yet, you will find up to 80 for type status or 93 of all records provided to GBIF, where before you could only see 33% of all the records that were provided to GBIF. And for some vocabularies, we don't really see a big change in what we did before. We used to have Java enums to interpret the verbatim values. But what we do get with the tool is that it's much more dynamic. We can actually update and have different versions of it. And we also have better language support, so we can actually enable searches across more languages than just English, which would be really nice and a big need for our user community also. We made a roadmap, and you can access it in the GitHub repo. And it's part of the strategic framework for 2023, 2027. There's much more details on which terms we prioritize, but currently we are prioritizing occurrence terms that we are already interpreting, but we just want to move them to the vocabulary server to have this more dynamic way of working with it. And we want to build on and coordinate with established data standards doing this work. So we, of course, rely a lot on community engagement for constructing and maintaining those vocabularies. But we also do some things selves. I did the sex vocabulary myself in a month. I could do myself, so that's good. But some of the vocabularies that we are soon implementing is the type status, the geotime that Erica presented. We have sex vocabulary and want to do some updates to life stage and establishment means. Even though I must say that Teresa's talk made me very uncertain whether we want to go into the whole life stage issue anymore. Maybe it's nice, it's simple. But just for the last slide here, I just want to point out why we as a data aggregator need to go in and really do the work is because we have 18 concepts in the geological context class. And those are maybe publisher relevant. I would let the paleo people discuss amongst themselves how relevant they are. But when we have a vocabulary, we need to serve those, for example, chronostratigraphy, which is 10 out of 18 of those terms, to a user base. So what we're looking into is really seeing if we can reduce those 10 terms to 1 or 2 search fields in our interface, because currently we have all of them listed in the events field, and we already have publishers who are very annoyed that the list is so long when they publish a Darwin Core archive. So that's where we really come in, that we need to integrate the standards, the community work, with what we actually serve for a very diverse biodiversity user base. So yeah. I want to say thank you, and please get in touch if you have any questions. We have a vocabularies@gbif.org email now, so if you want to reach out, you're free to contact me there. Thank you. And actually we have, I think, almost like 6 minutes for questions, and I don't want to spend up all the time for questions. So if anybody has questions for any of the speakers of the session, feel free to ask them now also, so we can start the discussion. Or you can ask me questions. Unless someone has a question for you, there is in the chat a question for Sophie. Yes, let's please have the question for Sophie, if that's all right.
So I'll read it here. David, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to pretend I'm you, okay? So thank you for the talk. Maybe you can answer this, or you can refer this question to your colleagues. when you work with different lists in HABREF, how do you handle the different identifiers, in particular if the original lists don't have any stable, or if the global identifiers for the term, any stable or global identifier for the terms? Do you generate URIs for them? So how do you handle identifiers if there is no stable identifiers?
I know the answer when there's stable identifiers.
Start with that one, maybe.
Yeah, there's mapping tables that you can download on the INPN website, where you can find the mapping between habitat codes on the national reference list and on international or other national typologies. I don't know how it's done when there's no stable identifiers on the other typology side. It might be a case where a new identifier is generated, but I'm not sure, so I will check with my colleagues and get back to you on the chat or via email. Or I think that's my email at the end of the presentation, so you can contact me through that way. So I hope that answered partly your question.
If nobody else has a question, I will not let you go, Sophie. Sorry, Sophie? I have a question for you also. Yes. So we looked into, because we recently proposed, or we just put in the task group draft charter for the Darwin Core Maintenance Group on realm, biome, and I think also environmental material, but it hasn't been mentioned, but it should be in there. We decided not to go to the level of habitat because we found it challenging. I think in GBIF we have more than 3 million verbatim values. I don't see, and I looked at it. I couldn't reduce that. I couldn't make any commonality out of that. But what I was thinking was basically what you're doing is what we need. We need the national level habitat lists, basically, because this is, I guess, do you only use it for environmental protection? Or is it your ministries that use this data, or do your researchers, do you know how people actually use the vocabularies you made for habitat? Do they both share data with them, but do they also use them for other stuff? Yes.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think at first it was a request by the Environmental Ministry. But it's used now more and more by scientists too, and it's one of the few French reference lists that we have, that we manage at Patronat, such as TaxRef for taxa, scientific names, and it's widely used both by public policies stakeholders and also by scientists and researchers. So HABREF is a bit more recent than TaxRef, so it might not be as well known for now. But the main objective is for it to be used both by the research side of things and also the public policies stakeholders.
Thank you very much. Is anybody else? Yeah, Jutta, please go. Oh, sorry. Maybe, please go ahead. We haven't heard from you yet, so please ask a question.
Thank you for your presentations. This is actually a comment or a question for both of you regarding the GBIF vocabularies and the mapping side of things and typologies. Have you considered adding the IUCN global ecosystem typology? The 3 higher levels are built with the realms, biomes and ecosystem functional groups, and there's just been a revision to integrate that with the International Vegetation Classification as well.
Yes, that's actually the whole point of the realm and biome, is to see if we can apply the IUCN typology and update ENVO at the same time. So we have ENVO people involved as well. So that's our hope, at least, that we can align those efforts. But there's some work to be done and some interests about which source you really use for the controlled vocabulary. And we recently had I guess, ratified LATMOR core, where they have realm and biogeography, and they use another source as far as I know. So there's some alignment and some talks that we need to have with people. Do you want to?
Just to answer quickly, I think the IUCN status is already integrated into the HABREF reference list because and some typologies as well, because as I was showing on the screen on the web pages for specific typologies, you've got a threat section, and I think it's based on the IUCN status of each habitat. So, at least in some typologies, it's already included.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Jutta, but I think we have to close the session now. Am I right? What time is it? Oh, we have 20 minutes. I don't know how that happened. Okay, sorry. I'm very bad at timekeeping. Please go ahead, Jutta.
So I actually have a question for everybody and also for the audience. It's how do we actually go about building these vocabularies? Because it seems there might be two approaches. One is kind of like the bottom-up approach, where researchers who are actually building the data are getting together and are discussing terms that they understand very well, and they try to find agreement, and it's kind of building it in a more abstract way. So, and that can be very difficult because it can involve many people from very different backgrounds. The other approach is kind of like more a top-down approach that maybe if I hear something from GBIF, it's kind of like, as a data aggregator or data provider, you need to handle all the data that comes in. So you go through the data and you kind of like say, these are the vocabularies we are using so that it becomes usable. And I'm wondering kind of like which approach, or there likely will be a balance, or we need to integrate both approaches. So I was wondering, would like to put that out, because it's a task or objective that we have in RECO to kind of like reconcile both approaches.
I think that's the same for us as well. We try to balance both. You know, the whole chronostratigraphy work has been super valuable, but as Erica said, it's because they had funding to do the work. We've been having very engaged community contributions to some of these terms, but it's, as many people already mentioned, keeping the vocabularies updated, people motivated. It happens, things change over time. I would say for GBIF we try to do both, but the reason we really do this is also because we have so much data that we need to serve, but also we also have the opportunity to actually pull on multiple sources. So we can align maybe more. For example, let me give an example with the we call it geotime because I was horrible at pronouncing the chronostratigraphy. I still don't do it very well, but it's called geotime in GBIF now. But so Erica had a good example because we use this international chronostratigraphy chart. Yes, so we have like one source, but you know, there's many more sources and it's a heavily debated topic, like how old is the specimen, right? So as she was also mentioning, we could actually include more sources and make one compiled vocabulary, but for some things it doesn't make sense. It was very interesting to hear this AGA presentation where they, oh, it wasn't AGA, the people who did the GADIM, yes, it was AGA. They actually take Getty thesaurus for country names and they do some changes to that. We don't do that. We have Getty thesaurus directly as source. We don't do a vocabulary for Getty because they already have a very well-maintained vocabulary that we can take from. So we don't need to do that. We just need to do it for specific terms. It's not everything that can be standardized. It's not everything that should be standardized because you also exclude stuff if you don't enable free text search in some cases. Sorry, do you have a question? Yes, please. Yes.
I think, from a user perspective who's trying to describe a lot of different types of scientific collections, we're looking for the controlled vocabularies that are most bought into by the community. So having like a GBIF, vocabulary or endorsed vocabulary for us would be something that we would be drawn to, because we assume that it has a larger community buy-in, I guess. Could
Yes,
be a false
okay.
assumption, I guess, but
Well, it's difficult to really track, right? Because it's something we already, all of these we already interpreted for a long time. The geotime was because it was requested. So yes, there is some we do get community feedback and we do try to do it, but as Erica's timeline showed, it might not be like next year, it might
Right.
be 6 years ahead of time, but yeah, that is something that of course influences GBIF decisions, what the user community need. Yes, Dimitri.
I don't know if it's a right question to address. So Darwin Core track a number of the keywords coming from different data sources. How many of those GBIF actually use for the indexing and calculation for their work? Anybody can answer this question?
I cannot, so I look at my colleagues. Do you know? Keywords for datasets?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you accept everything in Darwin Core, but in your operation,
Yes.
GBIF, how many are actually used?
Do you mean the terms that people use in the dataset or the keywords? Is there
Well,
keywords?
you're doing indexing, you're doing
Yes, of the terms.
searches, etc. How many are actually used? You can show all of those provided by providers, but inside of the systems.
Yes. No. We only index the around 85 that I showed you. No, I didn't show you, but
I may miss it. I may maybe sitting in a different room before.
No, oh, sorry. No, we have around 85 searchable terms. That means those are indexed. So everything
And
else.
which you try to normalize, like you normalize taxonomy, you normalize
Yeah.
Geographical distribution, geographical terms.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So no, but we don't normalize all of those, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
It's not. No. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
We don't. No, we have very few controlled vocabularies for those. But I can send you a list for which does have, if that's something that's
It's
of
just
interest.
of curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Because that's actually not easily retrievable because we are migrating from these Java enums to the vocabulary, so you don't see everything on the vocabulary server right now. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Let's have people online joining. That's fine. Yes.
All right, so it kind of relates. So I'm going to read the comments in the chat, unless people who are online want to do it themselves in their own voices. So I know Ben Norton speaks very fast, but for the sake of making it clear to the audience, Ben, I'm not going to make an impression of you. You can type slow. Okay, that's good to know. Okay. Latimer Core recommends specific vocabularies. There are just suggestions. Well, he didn't say the just, I just added that. There are suggestions and selected to improve understanding of the term. The group didn't go through an extensive process when selecting them. So I think that refers to the comment you had about the biome and whether to use vocabularies that were recommended by Latimer Core.
Okay, that sounds great. So what Ben is saying is that there's no controlled vocabulary, there's just recommendations?
Yes, that's what
okay,
he's
that makes
saying.
it easier. Okay.
So I think
Thank
it's,
you.
yeah, exactly. It's more a suggestion rather than word of law, if there is such a thing.
Then I have a question back to Ben. Is there a maintenance group for Latimer Core yet? There is? Great. I would like to know who that is. Jutta. Okay, I know that now. Thanks.
All right, there's also a question later, but I'm just going to read Jessica's comment. She writes that, sorry, I didn't ask people's pronouns, Jessica. I assume I can say she, but tell me if not. For more general terms, we can possibly reuse existing vocabularies from VIAF, Wikidata, Getty Thesaurus, medical subject headings, and Library of Congress subject headings. For specialized vocabulary, we can also consider reusing existing ontologies. For example, we can search from Bioportal if there are any such existing vocabularies. So I think that was relating to the conversation that we had around GBIF vocabularies afterwards. Yeah, that was just a comment read. And then Matt Yoder wrote, has GBIF tried to index against any of the OWL Bioportal ontologies?
I don't know.
No.
No.
I'm pretty sure the answer is no. No. No, because, I mean, so before Cecilie came and became the vocabulary lady that she is right now standing in front of you, we were using sort of really ad hoc interpretation of the data in the code. And so I'm pretty sure we didn't use any external source for the interpretation. Someone can contradict me if Matt is here.
Matt is not here.
No. Marcus? No. Yeah. No. Yeah, no, we didn't. Yeah. Okay. I think you have to talk in the microphone, otherwise the online people cannot understand. I can repeat it, but I'm sure you make a better impression of yourself.
I'm also not the perfect person to answer, but we do, like the traditional old way was very different on different terms that we interpret. There were some enumerations in Java that we had. There were some ontologies, that is ISO codes for countries, for languages. So there are some external standards that we have been using, but they were not exposed in a vocabulary server. But we had parsers, we called them, where there's alternative terms that we can use, and there was just standard cleaning mechanisms. So, yeah. But Genome, for example, for nomenclatural status is something that we use now. And then there's many terms in Darwin Core that also relate to each other. So you have lots of location terms and taxonomy terms. When you interpret one, that doesn't really make sense. So you really do interpret the whole set of those terms. So it's not just kingdom alone that you interpret, but you do the whole range of all those taxonomies and pin it to one taxon, and the same with location. They're all depending on each other. So it's usually not a single vocabulary that you're looking at, but you're interpreting in a much more complex way, really.
And I forgot to mention that we also have vocabularies in catalog, or in Checklistbank, in Catalog of Life that we use, of course. So these are not in the, and in GRCycle, but the ones in GRCycle are in the vocabulary server. Catalog of Life hosts their own. Yeah. Yes, please.
All right. It's very weird to see myself on camera here. Okay. David wrote, I think that recommended vocabularies and terms are really useful approach. There will always be cases where terms are missing from the vocabularies. So the usage of terms that are not in the vocabulary should trigger a warning, but usually be allowed. So I think when it comes, I think the comment relates to when it comes to data interpretation, meaning advice, but not enforce, I guess. If that's what you mean, David, you can also turn on your microphone if you prefer. Yeah.
Yes, hello. Thank you for being my voice.
So one thing we do try, and that's why we wanted to look at life stage and establishment means as well, is that we want to see, because the verbatim values change so much over very little time. So what we can do is we can basically see, are there verbatim values being shared that are not mapped, that should be mapped. And that's one of the things we want to look into, so we can actually improve, keep on improving by updating the version of the vocabulary. I agree recommendations is probably more simple, but it doesn't really help a lot with the internal processing. And for some things, as I listed, it's quite obvious what the controlled values can be. Of course, as we go into more complex stuff, such as habitat, for example, it might not be possible to really have controlled values at a global level, at least. So I guess I technically agree, but I also foresee a big issue with actually making sure people stick to the recommendations for most of these terms. But that's a whole discussion on its own, how you can train people to publish and use specific terms without giving them concrete categories.
Yes, I agree. It's always the fine line between should we enforce and have really high quality data that is published, but at the same time risk data not being able to be published because it's not fitting those vocabularies.
Thank you. So I think we should just call it an early lunch, maybe. Oh, there's a very long comment from Matt. Okay. Sorry, Matt, are you online or do you want to comment in person maybe, or would that be okay with you? Okay, we are ignoring Matt. No. Okay. Okay, good. Oh no, we have, I don't know. Yes. Yeah. Yes, so what Laura is saying is that we can continue the discussion in the Oxford abstract chat, because we might want to discuss more things during the symposium, and otherwise come talk to me or other people who presented. We'll be happy to take questions and discuss what we've been doing. So I think we should call it. I think we need a break. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much.